So if you own a 14 to 15 5.3 liter powered Silverado or Sierra and you're hunting for the hands down most affordable cold air intake, but you still want to make some good gains on your truck with no tune required, then you should be checking out the Spectre Performance cold air intake that we've got on my truck right now. At around the $150 price point, this thing beats out most other intakes currently available, but I'm happy to say you will actually pick up some pretty good curve gains with this intake. If you're curious, take a look at our dyno graphs. We went ahead, we ran our truck on the dyno bone stock, and it made 277 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque. We then installed the Spectre intake. We did not tune our truck, nor did we install any other supporting mods whatsoever, and we ended up making 277 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. Now I know what you're thinking, that makes for no peak horsepower gains, and it only makes for a peak gain of 5 pound-feet of torque, but take a second look at that graph real quick, and you'll see some pretty impressive curve gains. At pretty low on the RPM band, we're actually making gains of 28 horsepower and up to 44 pound-feet of torque. I can't say it any simpler, guys, that is really impressive for an open element design intake that's this affordable, and it does not require a tune. Pretty much speaks for itself. I don't think I need to say much more. Now, besides the fact that you get some really good improvements in terms of horsepower and torque, I actually like the look of this intake because it's a pretty cool old school look in my opinion. You got this nice polished intake tube here made out of aluminum, gives it kind of a street rod look, and you got that cool open element design with the conical high flow filter. And lastly, you got a really nice powder coated heat shield here. So overall, it also cleans up underhood appearance in the engine bay. We're ditching that really ugly factory intake and air tube. Other thing that's nice about the Spectre intake is it installs very easily. You can get this installed with a couple of basic hand tools, including some screwdrivers and some sockets, and for that reason I'm going to recommend this as a good first mod, and I'm also going to give this a very simple 1 out of 3 wrenches on my patented difficulty meter. Even if you've never turned wrenches before, you should be able to get the job done in less than an hour. So again, if you're looking for the most affordable cold air intake for your Silverado or Sierra and you want to make some good horsepower gains, stick around. I'm going to show you guys what tools you need, and then I'll walk you through the entire install step by step. To install your intake, you're going to need a standard drive ratchet as well as an 8 and 10 millimeter socket. And lastly, you're going to need a flathead screwdriver as well as a Phillips head screwdriver and a T15 Torx bit. An optional but helpful tool includes a long extension. All right, so obviously we have to remove our factory intake tube before we throw our new tube on, right? And that's pretty straightforward. There's 2 band clamps holding the intake tube in place, one on the factory airbox and one on the throttle body. All you're going to need is that 8 millimeter socket and your ratchet. It's also helpful to have an extension because those clamps are kind of tucked down in there. All right, now before you pull the factory air tube assembly out of the vehicle, you want to make sure you disconnect both of the breather hoses. That's for your crankcase blow-by. There's a little depression you can press underneath here and you can unclip them. All right, once you pull the air tube out, you can actually remove these breather hoses entirely. We're not reusing them. The kit does come with new hoses. All right, so we got our intake tube removed. The last step of our uninstall is removing our factory airbox, but before you do that, make sure you unplug your MAP sensor here. Go ahead and pull up on this red tab here, squeeze underneath, and you can pop it out like so. This is just held in with a couple rubber grommets, so you can also just pop it out gently. So with our factory airbox and tube removed, we got a nice little comparison here against that and our new Spectre intake, and you can see we're pretty much ditching everything about the factory system in terms of function and looks, right? We're getting rid of that plastic, we're getting rid of this ugly resonator box slash breather tube box here. We're going in favor with this nice polished intake tube. Again, it is made out of aluminum, it's not plastic, and we got that pretty old school looking cone filter with a very traditional black powder coated heat shield. Overall, it's gonna make the engine bay look a lot nicer, and it's gonna clean everything up. Now, before we get rid of the factory airbox though, we do have to swap over our MAP sensor to our new intake tube. They do provide you with new hardware to secure the MAP sensor. However, you are going to need a T15 Torx head screw in order to get these screws for the factory MAP sensor out of the airbox. Now, in order to install the MAP sensor onto your new intake tube, you are going to need a Phillips head screwdriver for the provided screws. All right, now that we've installed our MAP sensor on our new intake tube, you can discard your factory airbox and intake tube. You're not going to need them anymore. Next, we're going to assemble our heat shield, and in order to get this guy together, you're going to grab these small little bolts in the kit, and you're going to need the 5mm Allen key provided in the kit. Now, to tighten all this stuff together, you're also going to be using the flat washers and the nylock nuts, and in order to tighten those nuts down, you're going to need an 8mm socket on your ratchet. All right, with our heat shield assembled, we want to make sure that this filter is nice and insulated from all that engine bay air, so we're going to install our weather stripping. Now, it is pre-cut for the heat shield. You want to start at this long tab right here, put this directly flush up against it. All right, now that we have the weather stripping installed, we gotta do one more step before we install our heat shield, and that's installing the fitting for our new filter. You're gonna press this on the inside of the heat shield like so. You're also gonna grab the tube adapter on the other side with the appropriate sized band clamp and fit them together. Go ahead and tighten this down with your 8mm socket. All right, now we're finally ready to install our heat shield. Now this guy actually secures to the tray underneath where the factory airbox was, and on that tray there are a couple of 10mm bolts. You're gonna put those bolts through the little tabs on the new heat shield here, so you're gonna need a 10mm socket, and it's kind of recessed down far in the engine bay, so it's also helpful to have an extension for this one. Now before we install our intake tube, we're actually going to throw our filter onto the fitting inside the heat shield. You can see it's a little bit of a squeeze in here. So while we have the tube off and we have a little bit of flex in the heat shield, we're going to squeeze the filter past this little bracket right here. You're going to throw the largest band clamp on top of the filter, and you're going to need that same 8mm socket to tighten it down. All right, next we're going to install the rubber coupler for our intake tube on the throttle body. Again, you're going to need the appropriate size clamp, and you're also going to need your 8mm socket to tighten down the clamp. All right, next we're going to install our intake tube. You want to make sure you have both remaining clamps on the rubber couplers. Go ahead and throw the tube in place, tighten the clamps down, and we're also going to install our MAP sensor connection. All right, next we're going to install our breather hoses. Make sure you have the little clamps here on either end. You're also going to need a flathead screwdriver to tighten these down. All right, so once you got your MAF plugged in and both tubes tightened down, that'll wrap up the install. And that also wraps up my review of the Spectre Performance Cold Air Intake fitting your 14 to 15 5.3-liter powered Silverado or Sierra. I'm Travis, thanks for watching, and keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.